Welcome to the Myofascial Magic in Action podcast. My name's Joanne Avison, and I am delighted to be joined by my colleague, Paul Thornley. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hello, Joanne. I'm very good. I'm enjoying the early summer season here in Dubai.
So, Paul, we've been asked by people coming into Myofascial Magic, and more poignantly, perhaps people who are already in Myofascial Magic and loving it, that question about, first of all, what's the difference in what you're doing? And secondly, we come up against this thing, and we were talking about this with our community recently, this idea that out in the world, you can't charge for healing arts or movement teaching, or, what's the difference between one Pilates teacher and another, or one yoga teacher and another? And somehow this idea that you shouldn't have to pay for it if somebody's coming from the right place. If they were a good spiritual person, it would be free. There's a lot to say about that, and there's a lot in our respective spiritual practices that is free. So that's actually not the issue. The issue is the expertise and the years and years. I mean, you and I between us, I think we're ranking up somewhere near 60 years between us, which makes me feel old. But that time's been spent spending money on traveling to different conferences, to teach different people of different cultures, to work with everybody to raise their game. So they don't have to spend that enormous amount of money, those huge numbers of hours listening in conferences and working out what that meant and what that research is based on and why that doesn't actually mean what it says it meant. And of course, our hundreds of hours in the anatomy lab finding out what actually works, plus all the trial and error in between. So you have a lovely phrase, which I'm going to feed you and start you off with, which is, we use our vision, our 2020 hindsight, to give you foresight. So have a talk to me about that. What does that mean for you?
Well, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, don't we? Because over the journey of our career's lifetime, you're trying to hone something that you're passionate about and you're enjoying doing. And at the beginning, you just enjoy doing it, don't you? You're like, oh my God, you're overwhelmed by the curiosity and the questions you didn't know that you were going to ask or be asked. And where do I find the solutions or the answers to those questions? And when certain...
And how do I do the postures? And how do I learn the repertoire?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So you get giving all this information to finish your initial training and all of the modalities and modules within that particular training. And then you're let free into the community to go and play. And you have fun doing it. It's really great, bloody fun. And you get to interact with some great people of all sizes and shapes and abilities. And they're all doing their own version of whatever they're doing. And occasionally you get to meet them and you're benefiting and you're guiding them in a really positive way. And then go on, bloody bugger it. You make a mistake. And you didn't mean to make a mistake because you didn't know you were likely to fall over or you weren't aware of the hurdles ahead of you. And you put somebody in a position that they didn't really ask you to take them to. Or they come with something quite complex and quite confusing, and you're not even sure where to begin. How do I address these situations and scenarios? How this person's got them into a right pickle and predicament, and they've come to ask me to help because they've enjoyed working with me before, or they've heard I've helped one of their friends, colleagues, or family. Well, when those questions come up, that's why we have mentors, and they become invaluable. And you go reach out to those mentors and the people you initially learned off and the colleagues you met through the course, your fellow participants of the course, because we've all got our own experience. And you reach out and you get a variety of answers to the puzzling questions you've posed to everybody. And then you go and try and apply it to this particular person. And you may or may not have some success, or you learn how to develop a great referral network where you go, oh, this is out of my remit or my ability at this stage. But I know this person over here has great success with pelvic issues or shoulder issues or personal training or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's really important for me. At the beginning, I was giving great advice because I got a great foundation from my own tutor. And he said, Paul, you'll never know it all, but you're going to try and find out as much of it as you possibly can. And as you go along, you'll start to remove and ditch elements that you learned initially. And you'll then start to translate the information with much more confidence the more you try to use it. Don't just remember it. because you'll have forgotten it.
Well, it's got to come from experience, right? I know in my yoga teacher training school, we always insisted that somebody practiced something themselves before they attempted to teach it. So they were coming from an authentic well of experience, but also not just trial and error. They could appreciate and resonate with somebody who couldn't do it. So they became more patient. And I think that's all part of that trial and error process.
I think well, personal practice is it's invaluable for yourself, because like you say, you can experiment with the repertoire or movement style or therapy that you're trying to share with somebody, but you've got something to base that experience upon by your own sensation, your own interpretation, your own outcomes or failures, because then you can adjust. It's like cooking, isn't it? If you cook your favorite dish that your mother cooked and you're trying to replicate it, sometimes you have to jig it around a little bit. It's not quite the same. It doesn't quite taste the same as your mum's. It's nearly as good, but you have to mess around with the dosages and the temperature and the tempo and the variety of ingredients of the way they cooked it and how long they cooked it. And it's the same with movement or manual therapy. Our best results come from reflecting on our own experiences of it ourselves, because we can anticipate better, more effectively, because we've got something to remember and reflect upon. So we're almost predicting what's coming. And we're, with that in our mind and in our hands or in our cueing, we can then learn to slow down or speed up appropriately, so that we don't create these scenarios that we then have to dig into our skill set and go, oh my God, look what I've created. I now need to use something different.
Well, we build up a sort of somatic register of the range of things that can show us. I mean, there's very obvious things that are outside our scope of practice, as you say, but we build this trial and error. And I know from our own community what an invaluable resource that community is when you have a number of people at a similar sort of level of curiosity and experience, because I find this is with experienced practitioners who've found out the complexities of bumping into what they don't know. Let's face it, that's our biggest teacher, isn't it?
Well, the thing is our education is like collecting and creating our own library. Like you have a million books, and I know you've read every one of them multiple times, but you didn't throw them out. You just reorganized them so you had your favorite ones that were more useful today, but you haven't forgot where the older library in physiology, because they might go, wow, I've forgotten about that, or I think there's a different approach that I'd heard of in my past. And you go and look through your reference books, and all of a sudden the solution that is right in your hands. You were taught it. You just weren't aware of how to recall it instantaneously, but you have it in your library. You can recognize that you were taught something. Unfortunately, in today's society, people want it instantaneously.
Oh, I know. They want to do a 6-week holiday in Bali and come back as a fully fledged yoga teacher that understands everything. And yes, I'm not criticizing that. And I know there are some beautiful schools, and I know there's many beautiful schools of Pilates is another example. But the difficulty is you've learned this beautiful repertoire without having any experience of how it actually works in process.
Well, exactly. And so I personally do criticize it, because they all want to attain that level of instructor, mentorship, mentorer, without going through the rigors of learning, of experimenting,
over time,
of putting themselves front and center, which is a really, really threatening and brave thing to do, to put yourself in front of an audience and be the lead of the room. And some people take to it like a duck to water, and other people, they freeze. But it doesn't mean the one is better than the other. Just some of us need more time to grow in that role. And that's why knowing you have a mentor and a referral network is invaluable in your own growth at whatever speed you're going at. What we've found in our experiences, all of a sudden, by default, not by choice, not by design, we became the mentors. As we gained more experience and we'd use our knowledge more effectively, then we became the mentors. People started to look to us for advice, for information, for guidance. And that only came about because we put ourselves front and center, and we made sure that we were always in a room where there was some really clever people that had forgotten more than I'd ever learned. Because then I was prepared to listen more, because I was like, these people are having the most incredible discussions that I'm privy to because I'm in the same room. They're not trying to hide. They're not trying to obscure the conversation. They want us to hear. And if we had something valuable to add, or we had something curious to ask, we were invited to do so with these pioneers of the industry. And as those pioneers have grown, they've given over guardianship of their knowledge and their information and their teaching styles to their younger students. But they want those younger students to take the ball and raise the game with that information, not stay stationary and watch that knowledge just decay in their hands and stay
Absolutely.
the same. Well, and that's where we are now. That's where we are in the whole healthcare and fitness industry. There is such enthusiasm to take part, but there's this over enthusiasm to lead rather than learn, and make it really incredible learning experience as they learn what it is to lead the room while you're being guided how to become a great leader. Because who was it say? I'm trying to remember the name of the person now, but they say great coaches motivate and great instructors inform, but there are very few great teachers who educate. And I like us as great tutors and teachers of our individual arts to educate the instructors, to inform and educate the coaches so they excel in their particular role, but know where their role is and how it can grow and progress and evolve over a time. Just like the very thing they're trying to motivate and inform and instruct and educate, the human body. It requires that time frame to be its best version of itself at any given time in that lifespan.
Absolutely. And I think one of the difficulties is when you get a lot of people that can just do a 6-week course, 6 weekends in a row, and they tick the boxes and they can go out and technically practice and have the same title as someone who's been doing that work for years and decades. The difficulty is it's twofold. One, they have to be up to something that they don't know what it is, because you don't know what you don't know. And secondly, they are up against a sort of saturated market of people that then says, well, what's different about what you do? And then you have to look for, where do I get the confidence to do something that I can rely on, that's tried and tested, but doesn't mean, and this is the key, doesn't mean rinse, repeat, do the same on everybody. It is not repertoire led. It is not posture led. It's actually training people to see and hear and listen with their awareness. And then they can be profile led and understand the different profiles. And I think one of the big differences that we make with Myofascial Magic in Action is that we're very much about training our trainers to recognize profiles and have a big enough toolbox that each client becomes someone they can select the right tool belt to work with that person. And then the skill becomes, can you do that with 4 people? Can you do that with 8 people? Can you do that with 16 people? So that every single person in your class feels as if they had a one-to-one. The answer is yes, you absolutely can. And you have to give and forgive yourself for the time it takes to acquire not just the skill of each tool in the toolbox, but the wisdom. And I think this is where intuition comes in. The wisdom to select the right tools from the toolbox in your belt on the day and know, as you said earlier, when the answer is, actually, this one's outside my scope of practice. I want you to rest for the rest of the class and we'll have a chat afterwards. And that's actually a statement of confidence, isn't it? When you know when not to act and when not to apply what you already know.
And that is an incredible state of mind to achieve, that you're super confident in your own knowledge and your own interpretation of what you see and how expertly you share that with the people in front of you without belittling, without making people feel inferior, without making that they're weak, that they're unable, that what you're saying is appropriate and caring and compassionate to why they're feeling that way, and you recognize it within the room of other more capable, able bodies. But that comes, and we give that, we assist in the guidance of that because of our decades of learning and being guided ourselves. And it's not
completely. And thank God to all our teachers. We love you. We thank you. Yeah.
And without them, we would have been equally as lost. And that's what's so incredible about our industry. There are some super great characters out there. Characters we'll remember for the rest of our lives. And we are part of that character profile, right? People will talk about me a certain way, some good, some bad, but it's all true. Yes, people think about you certain ways, good, bad, and indifferent. And it's all true from their perspectives, but they still talk about us either way. And what I really love is watching an instructor who really is, I think, being any sort of tutor where you're delivering information to an audience, like public speaking, is really intimidating. And it's really hard to put yourself front and center and open yourself up and be vulnerable enough to be questioned and challenged on what you're saying and why you're saying it, especially against people that are feeling a different thing to what you're asking them to do. And that dialogue and conversation comes by doing it very frequently, but being open to the feedback you receive from your clients and from your colleagues and from your commercial bosses in the industry. And you have to justify and explain why you said something and what you meant by it. Now, that can only be attained by doing it regularly.
And auditing what you're doing. Auditing what you're doing as well is essential.
Well, that's the whole
not?
point of feedback, right? And making sure that you're not a closed door instructor, that you're an open door. You're inviting feedback. You want feedback. You want people to hear the atmosphere you're creating with your cueing and teaching style. You want people to hear and reflect on what you said and why you said it. So they're curious about what you're doing in the room. So it's an invitation for them to come in and see and maybe take part. And this is where we lose reception to training area, when there's these divisions and these barriers, where instead a studio, when we go to jiu-jitsu, all the doors are open. You see people having fun and rolling around and being guided and being corrected and being encouraged to make mistakes in the process of learning. But in our world, in yoga, Pilates, and fitness, not so much for fitness because it's quite open gyms, but the more classical approaches to movement in Pilates and yoga, they close rooms. And sometimes that's necessary. So you turn the lights off and it's quiet and calmer. But as an instructor to grow, the only way you grow is by being audited and feedback from the clientele who listen to you, from how you heard yourself, and from your colleagues and peers within your community, helping you understand what people hear when you're saying something and what they interpret you to say, and was it mirrored by what you actually meant. But that all comes from that library of education that you've acquired over many, many years of investing time, investing money, but more importantly, investing in yourself and trusting the process that to grow, you must invest in you. And that will take you all around the world to all of these fabulous educators that are offering the most amazing courses that should ramp up and complement your initial training. My only wish is that the initial training phase started to evolve a little bit more, and it set them up for more success earlier, rather than establish really a confusing paradigm where they tell them that this is the body's a certain way, that it is mechanical, that there are all of these origin insertions. And once you open that Pandora's box, and that's their initial learnings, then they're biased towards it. And then we have to go through the process of explanation about why that was the classical academic learnings, or why it's been established so long, but why now we talk slightly differently, or we explain things in a different fashion with a different understanding of the physiology we are today.
Well, this is this big gap between classical and contemporary understanding of anatomy that fascia and myofascia has brought to our understanding, that modern technology has allowed us to see differently because there's different tools for visualizing the body under the skin. And I think we've been so privileged, Paul, to be able to be in the lab with soft fixed dissection and, a fresh frozen and so on, but also in our exposure to the translation of that from the science to the classroom. So we actually have those terms and those visuals and those abilities to join the dots and weave the web between. And I think, I was talking to John Sharkey the other day, and we were saying how important it is to have those landmarks, the origins, the insertions, the classical anatomy, but not as if that's the goal, as if that's giving you the guide points for you to join the dots. It tells you the rungs on the ladder and it tells you the bars of the ladder. But unless it's organized and structured as a ladder, it's not safe for you to climb it. And there's a third thing that has to be included to join that all together, the glue, call it the screws, whatever it is functionally, that joins the bars and the rods that make the ladder, that then attach it to the wall you choose to climb, and then you have the in-between. And I think my joy and my excitement in myofascial magic in action is that we work with such I mean, they're brilliant. Everyone, we've got elite athletes saying, I can't believe the difference this micro movement work has made to my athletics, to my Ironman, to my skiing style. The subtlety is incredible, but it's expanded my capacity so hugely. And the reports we're getting back of our clients' clients, that's where the real magic comes. But I think we're both a little bit frustrated in that we would love it if the original trainings had that wisdom behind them, and the students weren't set up the way they sometimes are to go, oh my God, everything I've done is wrong. You're making my history wrong. No, 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 no. This is the classical foundation. Learn these postcodes. We're going to teach you how the accommodation goes in those regions. We're going to help you get from the map to the territory. And I think that's the absolute keystone, isn't it?
Listen, it's like this. If you try to do a jigsaw like you've never seen the initial picture, it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, Pandora's box has been opened and fascia is out. You can't put it back in the box now. And it's been out for a very, very long time, but it's now out in the more established medical research world. The scientific world cannot hide and close its eyes and ignore and side position it and say, yeah, we know it's there, but it's not that influential. We'll just talk about the puppet elements of the musculoskeletal system.
Oh, and we'll mention the extracellular matrix, but we're not going to talk about the fascia. What do you think the extracellular matrix is?
So my point is, what I would really like, again, this is why we've created Myofascial Magic in Action. Because like we said, every single year or second year, there is a new iPhone. Brand new iPhone. I promise you today, if you do the same analogy with the educational in the medical and fitness world, nobody is given a campfire to send signals.
Nor are they taught how to use a drum.
Correct, right? We understand that it worked in his day. It was the way. It was like light years of everything else that came before it. And yes, that was the modern day science. We now knew how to make fire. Now we can use the smoke from the fire to signal of people far away. And now, in 2025, we now have the iPhone 16 or 17. Whatever it is.
I don't know.
My point is, in today's educational systems in our industry, we're still teaching and giving people the iPhone 16, but telling them it works like a campfire. And then wondering why they get confused and lost in how it responds to those archaic, out-of-date explanations of the physiology that we know better today. Yes, it has its place, but it's in history. And we use some of it because it's still relevant, like you say, to identify landmarks, to bring people closer to a region. So the conversation is of an ilk where we know we're in the right area and ballpark. And unfortunately, they're still doing things that are out of date, but with the most modern technology. And the human body, we've never known more about it. But why we still keep calling it a biomechanical lever-informed?
I know,
but it's important. It's important that we keep going, which is why when we created this course, we said we agreed. We are going to create the very latest understanding of physiology as the foundation of our course.
Yeah. And bring it to life in practice, not just in theory.
It has to be in practice because people are always moving. This notion that you're contracting something independently of its already naturally ongoing contractures, that it must be for you to be alive, is crazy. All you're doing is ramping up the volume or decreasing the volume of something that's already in motion.
And buying into an injury in long term, we know that.
Correct.
We're literally buying into repetitive strain injuries. We know it, and it's so simple. It's simple to avoid.
We know it. But the people that are learning it don't know that the way they're being taught it and the way they're then sharing it is often creating repetitive strain because of the old-fashioned explanation of the biomechanics that doesn't explain the physiological reality of a human body.
Or a human being that animates it. On which note, we're going to get really excited about our next podcast. So make sure that if you haven't already, you've gone to YouTube, you've gone onto the podcast there, Joanne Avison podcast with the Myofascial Magic in Action playlist, and click the subscribe button to make absolutely sure that you're first to hear. We've got some absolutely gorgeous things coming up for you. And you'll hear the next one from me and Paul. We're going to be doing an episode on actual tips and tricks to avoid back pain rather than talking about it. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Do get in touch, myofascialmagic.com. You can find out all about the courses. You can press the Get Started button and listen to a completely free training. And there's just so much content, isn't there? There's so many resources.
I was teaching a class this morning and I had a visitor from overseas in Dubai, and she came to my class and she was raving about our podcast. I was just surprised she'd heard of it. And she said, honestly, she found it so useful to reinforce her teachings, because she can then say, listen, you see how I taught you today? Go and listen to this podcast. And it's explained in more depth by these two Egypts that live in England and one in Dubai.
On which note, I love you. Thank you to your lovely client. Thank you to all our listeners. We really, really appreciate you listening. We love the comments that we get on YouTube as well. And please keep them coming, because we design podcast episodes in the future to be published based on what you've asked for. In the meantime, have a great week. Love and light from us both.
Bye-bye, guys.